discussion group go? Did you discuss fear? No?
No. We didn't reach the fear because we were a little bit stuck. Our group, we were a little bit stuck about all the labels of definitions of wrong and
mistaken and
we were a little bit confused about.
Okay, alright, that's good. You were confused?
We discussed fear.
Pardon?
We also discussed fear.
You did discuss fear, okay. What kind of conclusion did you come to just about fear?
It's kind of both. I feel like you said that you asked if it's wrong view or mistaken.
Yeah. Wrong consciousness, yeah.
So sometimes when we talk about if it's like fear of death, like really angel, like where we live, or something like that. So is it really mistaken or wrong? And for how long? The fear. So maybe sometimes for 15 seconds it's really maybe not a wrong fear, but it makes you do something.
Oh, and I know. Okay, is it afflictive or is it helpful? Yeah.
And then if so how long the fear
has to last to be.
To last, and then it's wrong. Like it's also this kind of. And of course, if the mistaken fear, like there's attachment and all this kind of
right.
things.
Okay.
Because it's many.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
Many complicated, many kind of. But it's sometimes like it's the basis of others, of the attachment, of the anger. Because we talk about anger, and sometimes we understand that before that there's a fear of losing something, of hurting.
Yes. So fear can cause other afflictive emotions such as anger, attachment, jealousy, etc. Okay, very good.
It's not a mental factor, is it?
Yes, it is a mental factor.
It isn't.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
Because I couldn't find
It is a mental factor. It's a mental function kind of. But if it's none of the mental functions that is mentioned, it doesn't mean that there's only the ones that are mentioned. There's so many.
I looked at the 51.
Yeah, no, there are so many different mental, and the ones that Asanga mentions, the 51, the 51 mental functions or mental factors, not all of them are mentioned because there are so many more. But fear, like I said, is, especially in the 21st century, it's much more of an issue than I guess it was in the past. Well, there was fear of being eaten by a lion or whatever, like being eaten or being... But the kind of fear...
Anxiety. There is a difference between fear and anxiety.
Well, yes, anxiety is maybe not as pronounced as fear, it's not as strong, but it's all this kind of like being fearful, being anxious, having... Fear is just a stronger version maybe of anxiety. But it's an interesting phenomenon because there's fear of something that may happen. That may happen.
It's usually.
Pardon?
It's usually like this.
Well, fear of death, it's not, it may happen, it will happen. That's the difference. So, like sometimes, the first kind of fear, if we're fearful of something that may happen, that makes so much less sense than the fear of something that's definitely going to happen. Because like this could happen, and that could happen. And like if you have a situation, right? So tomorrow something is going to happen. But 5 different possibilities appear in your mind, of which only one is going to take place. But you're fearful of all 5. So it's like, it makes life so much harder because actually just one thing is going to happen, but it's like as if 5 things would happen and you're scared of all of them. Maybe this, oh it's terrible. Or maybe that, oh no. Or a third possibility, oh I'm so scared, right? So here it's, well, there's a way to deal with this in the sense that if we become aware, we're just afraid of the different possibilities. Well, we don't know whether it's going to happen, so deal with it when it arises and not be fearful before that. Of course, if it gets you to plan ahead and to be fearful as Imbal, right? As Imbal, I was thinking, Elamso. Imbal's name is Elamso. Don't know how to get those two wrong. But anyway, so as Imbal said, like, of course, there may be fear for a few seconds, right? And that gets you to work and prepare and plan. Is this disturbing, that kind of sound?
CP would like to ask you to lower down the microphone.
Yes, I will.
Okay. It
Okay,
disturbs her, I don't know.
Yeah, it makes a funny sound.
Show me it's okay.
I mean, I can hear that there's this kind of weird...
Make sure it's just a little below the lips.
I
not
should be
in
below
front,
the
a little bit
I
below,
wanted to
yeah.
make sure I see it.
Just like the tip of your nose.
Okay.
So you know it exists.
Okay, alright, great. So this, yeah, I can hear it, sounds better. Okay, so, what was I saying? Yes, so, if of course we are scared of something and then therefore we prepare properly, fine, that's a good kind of fear. It doesn't last too long, okay. But this kind of worry, well, this may happen, or that may happen, and what happens if it does? And, well, it paralyzes us to such a degree that later on we cannot plan ahead, and it's not helpful. So that is definitely a type of fear we need to deal with. Only one thing is going to happen. 5 things can't happen simultaneously. In a sense, well, you know what I mean. I mean, of course, in some situations, all sorts of problems can arise, but usually it's 1 or 2 different things that arise. So to become aware, the future is uncertain, and so far we've dealt with things, and we're going to be alright as we were before. What is the worst that can happen? And of course, to also see that problems can be good. Now you may wonder, well, Buddhism is about removing problems, and now they're telling us problems are good? Well, of course, if you can remove the problem, that's best. But if you cannot, use it in a way in which it helps you to grow, in which it helps you to become stronger, in which it helps you to become more compassionate. So in that way, there's less of fear of problems because you can use it in a positive way. So if there's a problem that arises, great opportunity to learn more about yourself, etc. And in that way, there's less fear, and you have the space of mind to deal with it in the moment. But I think it's also, in terms of the modern life, I think the modern media, politicians, etc., they try to instill fear in us. Vote for Bibi or you're in trouble, right? I mean, it's not just in Israel, it's like that everywhere. In the United States and in Germany, you know, fear makes people make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't do if they didn't experience that fear. So this is a very common method, and this also reminds me of commercials, advertising, how we are bombarded with these ideas, and they're very sophisticated. And honestly, I'm at awe about the psychology behind modern advertising, what the media, politicians use. And I'm in awe about it, and I think it's important to try and understand it, to reflect on it, to analyze it. What are they? What means are they? Like, to get an insurance. I mean, it's in India. It's like the commercials they use. You know, the whole family gets killed, but thanks God he got an insurance. It's like, you know, like the father dies, and this person dies, and there's this unhappy family that didn't have an insurance, and then there's this other family. And no one dies, and everyone is happy because they have an insurance. It's so ridiculous and obviously unrealistic, but it must be efficient because they show it all the time. So, therefore, we live at a time, we live in a day and age where fear may be instilled by media, by commercials, etc., and we need to become aware of that. Desire, of course, desire even more so, but also fear of not getting what you desire, right? So fear of not being happy, fear of not getting what you want, and those are just little tricks, and understanding those I think is one of the first steps to go, I'm not going to be fooled by that. I think advertising is a great one. I love advertising. I think it's so clever. But once you understand the underlying message, then you won't be affected by it in that way. So this I feel is very important. And also, self-confidence is very important. Self-confidence versus self-cherishing. We can easily misunderstand or misperceive those two or mix those two up. Self-cherishing, as like seeing myself as more important, that leads to fear. Self-confidence is an antidote to fear. There's nothing I cannot do. I can deal with this problem. Whatever happens, it's okay. It allows me to grow. I'm strong enough. I can deal with it. I've done it in the past and I will do again. And that's realistic. That's realistic. So therefore, self-confidence versus self-centeredness. I'm really important. Nothing horrible should happen to me. My reputation is important. My physical well-being, my this. That leads to fear. If I want certain things for myself that I feel like without those I won't be able to live, external things, well then that leads to fear because that we can't control. So I think it's important, all these aspects are important, self-confidence, reducing self-centeredness, and just understanding, well, whether there's a problem or there's a positive situation, never mind, both are beneficial in their own way. Fear is a difficult one. I still think, especially I think when you're younger, it's worse. When you're younger. Because growing up nowadays is not easy. It was never easy, but it's definitely, there's a lot of stuff that, like the internet and cyberbullying and all that, that is on top of all the bullying that happens anyway, part of growing up, being the bully, getting bullied, etc. On top of that, that's an additional factor. And I think it's important. This is not really mentioned in Buddhism, but we need to find ways of, well, if you have children in particular, to help your children to deal with this, with fear. Fear that is good versus fear that is not. Actually, Buddhism talks about a type of fear that is helpful. A type of fear that is realistic, and as Imbala said, a type of fear that allows you to get ready, that allows you to be prepared. So fear of death, it's okay to be fearful of death, but it should only be in the beginning. And then later on, you welcome your own death. You're ready, you welcome it. So that would be an example where you only in the beginning have that fear and then deal with it, yes.
You said before that there is this fear about stuff that will not actually happen. But there is also fear about stuff that
will happen.
Will. Like,
yeah.
As the example of fear of death, that we will die. But I don't see the difference so much because my fear of death, as I experience it, it's not something that is actually about death. So I think it's like about most things. Like my fear of death, usually when I experience that, it's about me gonna end. And then it's like not really true because like, or at least not as I imagined that. So it's not really different than, let's say, if I'm afraid that I'm doing some test and I will fail. This my imagination about me failing, even if in reality I will fail, it's not the same. It's not the reality and the even if you know what I'm trying to say?
I think I understand that. But I think your fear of death, it has different aspects. But the fear of having to give up the stuff of this life, that's also part of your fear, isn't it? So, okay, the fear of going out of existence. Well, you will go out of existence. You're not the same person any longer. In a way, I mean, you go out of it. Every day you're a different person, right? I mean, yesterday's person is gone and there's a new one. But especially when you die, you will not be like that. I mean, just look at the different Dalai Lamas. They're very different from reincarnation to reincarnation. So you take on a different body, and that determines where you're born in a different environment. It can be very different. So in a way, you do disappear as the person who you are. Plus, I think a lot of our fear is of leaving behind certain things. And that is going to happen sooner or later. We have to leave everything behind that we accumulated, that we worked for in this lifetime. All we take with us are the tendencies. Yeah. Okay, anyway. Alright, going back to this. And we have more time for questions regarding the doubts and stuff that you still have about these ideas. Yes, they're difficult concepts, but some of you may have just heard about this for the first or second time. We studied this for 17 years, so be patient. Don't be hard on yourself, in other words. When I say don't be patient, I'm not saying don't be patient with other people. No, be patient with yourself. It takes a while. But anyway, I believe if you've heard it once, and however confusing it is, a second or third time, it's all about doing it again and again, and listen to it again, reading certain books about it, and it'll just become easier. Okay. But here, the next division that I'd like to go into. Now here, a lot of what I explained today is written out in here in terms of a mind that realizes its object, that knows its object, versus a mind to which the object appears but is not ascertained. That is explained in here. There are examples given. The example of the sandwich and everything, yes, it's here. And also in terms of meditation, of course, when you meditate, you awake. Well, there's also dream yoga, but really, like, let's be realistic. When we start meditating, we meditate in the awakened state. That's what we mainly use. So, what is the meditating mind? The sense consciousness or the mental consciousness? The mental consciousness, okay? The sense consciousnesses play a part. In what meditation does the sense consciousnesses play a part? Breathing. The breathing meditation, because you better be aware of that sensation. But it's the mental consciousness is the main awareness that is aware of the breathing in and out. That's the one that focuses. And it's the sense consciousness that enables us to do so. Now, with regard to the meditation, this meditation or others, actually your sense awarenesses should become awarenesses to which the object appears but is not ascertained. Ideally.
Is not what?
Ascertained.
Yes, so there's this awareness. It says here on page 15 that there's the explanation of an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained. That's a really long way of describing this particular type of mind. Remember, I told you, when you have a mind that directly perceives its object, like a sense consciousness. Here we're mainly dealing with sense consciousnesses. Mental consciousnesses are explained. So a sense consciousness is a mind that either knows its object, right? Either it knows its object. Either it's a correct mind, its object exists, or its object does not exist. If it doesn't exist, it's just a wrong sense consciousness. But if its object does exist, there are two possibilities. Either it knows its object, or the object just appears, and there's no ascertainment, there's no knowledge of the object. Those are the two possibilities. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then, like I explained before, if you have 5 sense consciousnesses active at the same time, it's impossible that all 5 of them know their object simultaneously. You can only know one of the sense objects at one point in time. The other 4, in that moment, are awarenesses to which the object appears, but is not ascertained. Okay? Nangalamange in Tibetan. It's still long in Tibetan. It's called Nangalamange, which exactly means that. An awareness to which the object appears, but is not ascertained. So at one point in time, you can only have one of the sense consciousnesses knowing their objects. But they switch very quickly back and forth, which is why we're under the impression we can do all 5 together. But that is like, for instance, in India, They're really into, they love these what would you call them? These light chains. You know light chains? Where like a light, like many lights, and they blink so quickly, one after the other, it gives you the impression that they're there at the same time. It's like a circle or whatever. But actually they're just very quickly. It's too quickly for us to notice the difference between the lights that are like them when they're off. So it gives us the impression they're all taking place. They're all light bulbs are lit, or like a movie, yeah. Or like, let's take a movie. Movie works better actually. So a movie, they're just different picture frames, and there's no movement, there's no smooth movement, but if you play it fast enough, it gives you the impression there is no interruption. Yeah, the movie works best. So, similarly here, we are under the impression we perceive everything at the same time. It seems very smooth, but it's actually not true. Alright, so those are the two types of awareness. The mind that knows its object, in terms of a sense, here I'm talking about sense consciousness. So sense consciousness either knows its object or it just appears and it's not ascertained. When we meditate, we don't want a sense consciousness, such as the eye consciousness, to know its object. Because that shows your attention is with your eye consciousness. So when you keep your eyes open and you start seeing crumbs or patterns, right, in the carpet in front of you or whatever, oh, there's a crumb. Where's that crumb from? You can't help it. Your mind focuses on it. It's actually very good to keep your eyes open. But because your eye consciousness is the dominant one, it's very hard to switch that eye consciousness off and to see without seeing. You know, sometimes we see without seeing. We're like, we tell someone a story and they're like, kind of staring into space. Either they're listening very attentively to us or they're thinking about something else. So in that moment, that eye consciousness is an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained. Because you're not paying any attention to it. So this is what you should ideally have when you meditate and keep your eyes open. And with sound too. Just appearing. And sometimes we don't recollect later on. There was a sound outside. Definitely your ear consciousness was there. It definitely appeared to your ear consciousness, but you don't remember. Which shows you had an awareness to which the object appears, but it was not ascertained, because you have no memory of it. It's not like you've forgotten. It just never registered. Okay. Now this is the kind of meditative mind. You want the mental consciousness to be active, and the other sense consciousnesses to be inactive. To be an awareness to which the object appears but it's not ascertained. Alright. So that should be enough in terms of sense awarenesses.
Can you repeat the two kinds?
The two kinds. Well, it's here on page 15. Page 15 at the top. That's why I keep saying I don't have time to read through everything, otherwise we won't be able to finish this, so you need to read it on your own. So there they are, sense consciousness that realize they're objects of engagement, their main objects, and sense consciousnesses that are awarenesses to which the object appears but is not ascertained. Whatever I tell you is right in here. Okay.
It's like identify.
Pardon?
I asked if a certain is like identify.
Yeah, like identifying, where you later on mentally it registers basically. Ascertain, really, usually what it means is when you know something with your sense consciousnesses, then the mental consciousness will also know that object. Pardon? I don't know what levade means.
In levade is to verify.
Ah, to verify. Okay, so you mentally verify or not verify. So that's the difference. So you know something with your sense consciousnesses, and that is verified then later on, or ascertained with your conceptual mind. But if you didn't realize it, then there's that verification cannot take place. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Anyways, you just need to read this. I mean, the material I gave to you, basically that you have also something to read through, and then in addition to the explanation, hopefully it becomes clearer. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. We studied this for a month and month. So, only having those 2 days, it's stretching it, but it's better than nothing. All right. I guess I can only do this in Israel to actually give you this much for 2 days. Okay. Well, because people have the interest and work hard usually, so it works actually. But this is not that hard to understand, which is why I go right away to the category of conceptual and non-conceptual awareness. That is really difficult. But let me just quickly go over what you've learned, because otherwise you feel like, I know what I don't know, but you're not really aware of how much you've actually understood in that short time. So what you're all aware of is that every consciousness has an object. That consciousness is non-physical, it always has an object, always has something to apprehend. This part I think we're clear about. Whether we're clear about this in terms of our own experience, that's different. But you can just check your mind and eventually it'll become clear. And also we say that the mind has the function, 2 basic functions. It's luminous, that is clear and knowing, in that something appears to the mind, but at the same time the mind can know this object, can apprehend this object, cognize it, has that ability. And then there are just different types of mind. There are minds, the object of which does not exist. So by definition, if it's unintentionally perceived that way, if you perceive it that way because you don't know any better in that moment, I mean that mind itself just arises naturally without you intentionally creating the mind, it's called a wrong consciousness. If its object does exist, it's a correct consciousness. That's just how you use the word wrong here in this context. You can use it in a different context, of course, wrong or right mean different, but here this is how the word is used. We borrow the word from the English language, wrong consciousness. In Tibetan it's actually reversed consciousness. It's in reverse, it's reverse to reality. Okay, because its object doesn't exist. Alright, so we call it wrong consciousness. Okay. Now, then, therefore you have this division of wrong consciousness and correct consciousness. Its object exists, its object doesn't exist. Certain wrong consciousnesses don't really matter, but as we've heard, a lot of them can actually harm us. Potentially any misperception of reality can be harmful, and in particular when it comes to anger, when it comes to attachment, jealousy, they're very harmful to us more than to anyone else. On the other hand, compassion and love, actually we feel they're for others, but they benefit us much more than they benefit others. That's the secret about love and compassion. And about anger and aversion, on the opposite side, they harm us much more than anyone else. So, and one being based on reality, love and compassion being based on reality, while anger and attachment not being based, well, it makes sense that reality is so important. Alright, so this is wrong and right consciousness. But we also differentiate between sense consciousness and mental consciousness. Why do we explain sense consciousness? It's not because they're that important, but because we need to understand the mental consciousness, which is so important. It's the one that's always talking. Endlessly. The narrator of everything. All day long. One thought, another thought. Right? It's the one that's always thinking. And giving the explanation of sense consciousnesses and whatever is in here and how can they be wrong, and there are certain conditions. If you're on page 17, why can a sense consciousness, for instance, be wrong? What are the different reasons? Right? It's very easy. It's not difficult to understand. It can have to do with the object, because the object looks a certain way. Right? A white snow mountain, because of the light, can appear as blue. So you perceive a blue snow mountain, which doesn't exist. Or it could be the situation is such that you are in a train and the other train is moving, and so you believe yourself. So that's because of the situation. Then there's the basis. In terms of the basis means, for instance, if you have a problem with your eyes, then